Imagine stepping into one of the most lavish palaces the world has ever seen: gilded halls, glittering chandeliers, and enough silk and satin to wrap the globe twice. But take a deeper breath, and you'd be hit with a stench so foul it could wilt a bouquet of roses at 20 paces. Yes, welcome to the Grand Palace of Versailles in the 17th century, a place where beauty met brutality, elegance danced with filth, and royal women, for all their jewels and titles, endured a hygiene horror show. Today, on Empress Secrets, we dive headfirst, metaphorically, thank goodness, into the shockingly unsanitary lives of noble women at the height of French royal power. These are not just five, but a multitude of horrific, unbelievable, and downright disturbing hygiene habits and customs that defined what it meant to be a woman at court. If you were a woman of noble birth during the age of the Sun King, Louis XIV, you were expected to shine just as brightly, but the methods behind that illusion of radiance were often dark, painful, and sickening. Personal hygiene, in the sense we understand today, was nearly non-existent. Bathing was seen not as refreshing, but as dangerous. Doctors warned that water could open your pores and let in disease. Clergymen preached that the bathhouse was the devil's playground. The result? Bathing was practically taboo. Instead, noble women relied on vinegar-soaked cloths, scented gloves, and strong perfumes to mask their body odor. They would dab themselves with rose water or orange blossom essence, but that did little to cleanse the skin. These women, bound in layers of velvet, lace, and corsetry, would sweat profusely, often trapped for hours in carriages or salons with no ventilation. Some noble women wore the same chemise for weeks under their gowns, and if they did change, it was more for fashion than cleanliness. And when the rare bath was taken, it was more ritual than relief. The royal bath was filled with herbs, oils, and flowers, not for cleaning, but for symbolism. Imagine sitting in lukewarm, milky water filled with lavender while dirt and sweat clung to your skin. And remember, baths were communal. The queen might bathe after a duke, a duchess, or a servant depending on the order of importance. The water grew darker with each occupant, but no one dared complain. It was tradition. Outside the tub, women powdered their faces with white lead makeup, highly toxic, and reddened their cheeks with crushed beetles or cinnabar, a mercury-based pigment. This thick paste often caused sores, which they covered with beauty patches, small black velvet circles shaped like stars or moons meant to look fashionable but actually hiding infected skin. Meanwhile, the royal court of Versailles, as opulent as it appeared, lacked one basic amenity: toilets. With thousands of courtiers, guests, and servants, Versailles often functioned as a palace of excrement. Chamber pots overflowed. Privacy was a luxury. Men and women alike relieved themselves behind tapestries, under staircases, or in secluded corners of the vast gardens. Many nobles carried perfumed handkerchiefs not just for elegance, but to block the overpowering smell of urine and feces that lingered through the marble halls. Servants would rush to clean, but with limited water supply and rudimentary waste disposal systems, they could only do so much. And Versailles wasn't alone in this. Across Europe, noble households suffered similar fates, filth hidden beneath lace curtains and golden banisters. In winter, the smell worsened as windows stayed shut, and in summer, disease spread faster in the heat. The risk of typhoid, cholera, and dysentery was constant, yet the court continued its performances of grace and poise. The most grotesque paradox was that the most elegant women lived in filth unimaginable today. And then there was the matter of hair. Wigs were not optional, they were essential. The grander the hair, the greater your influence. Styles took hours to create, involving teams of stylists who worked with iron pins, wax, animal fat, and wooden structures. The results were magnificent. Miniature gardens, castles, birds, and even ships could be perched atop a woman's head. But these wigs were never washed. Instead, women used scented powders to cover the smell of sweat and rot. Underneath, their natural hair was often matted, infested with lice, or scabbed from scratching. They used ornate silver lice claws, but infestations were inevitable. Fleas were common. One duchess wrote in her diary that she once found a family of mice nesting in her unused wig. Yet to forego the elaborate styles was unthinkable. A woman's hair was her statement, her signal to the world that she belonged among the elite. Even if it meant suffering blinding headaches or neck spasms, the wig stayed on. At night, they would sleep sitting up to preserve the structure, wrapped in silk scarves scented with rose oil to keep away lice. Even more tragic were the inner struggles, the daily toll on physical and emotional health. Corsets weren't just fashion, they were prisons. Women wore them from childhood, their ribs reshaped, their spines bent. Breathing was difficult. Eating was painful. Fainting was common, so much so that salons kept smelling salts on hand. Yet to remove a corset in public was indecent. Their feet, often crammed into too small shoes, bled with bunions and bruises. Yet they danced night after night. Their nails, considered unattractive if bare, were painted with mixtures of wax and lead. Their teeth, blackened by sweets and poor hygiene, were masked with closed-lip smiles or false teeth made from ivory or animal bone. Tooth decay was rampant. Dentists used pliers, no anesthesia, and boiling water. Screams echoed in the halls, but again, it was the price of beauty. Let's not forget the dangers of fashion itself. Gowns made of highly flammable silk often caught fire from candles. Women suffered burns, and some even died trying to look their best. Crinolines and farthingales restricted movement, causing accidents on stairs or in carriages. One duchess drowned when her hoop skirt prevented her from swimming to shore after falling from a boat. And yet, fashion marched on. Food, too, was both a joy and a threat. Royal kitchens were under constant pressure. With poor refrigeration and no sanitary regulation, meats often spoiled before cooking. Fish arrived days after being caught, wrapped in cloth, crawling with maggots. Spices were used not for flavor, but to mask rot. Raw sewage sometimes flowed beneath the kitchens. The smell of roasting pork might mingle with the stench of human waste. Parasites were common. Tapeworms were part of everyday life. Many women suffered from chronic stomach pains, anemia, and fatigue, but continued to host, laugh, and sip wine, all for the court. The court did not allow weakness. Even childbirth, the most sacred act, was robbed of privacy. Queens gave birth in public rooms with courtiers and officials standing by. It was believed that a prince's birth had to be witnessed to ensure no deception. But this meant that a woman in excruciating labor endured it in front of an audience. She could scream, but not too loudly. Cry, but not too much. Collapse, but only once the air was out. Tools were unclean, hands unwashed, knowledge limited. Infections killed countless women. Stillbirths were common. Some women gave birth alone when attendants failed to arrive. Others bled to death as the court argued over lineage. And when the child survived, the mother was expected to recover quickly and conceive again. There was no postpartum rest, no time to grieve. Their wombs belonged to the crown. Their pain was national property. Behind closed doors, many noblewomen wrote in journals, some burned, some preserved. These fragile accounts speak of loneliness, physical agony, fear of childbirth, disgust with hygiene, and longing for freedom. They dreamed of simplicity, a hot bath, clean sheets, fresh bread, not spoiled by rats. One lady-in-waiting wrote that she envied the village washerwomen for their access to soap and rivers. These weren't petty complaints. These were the truths beneath the crowns. These women, though dressed in silk and pearls, were prisoners of expectation. Their entire lives were curated, choreographed, censored. They bled in silence. They cried behind curtains. They endured lice, disease, hunger, pain, and smiled through it all. History remembers their titles: Empress, Duchess,
Queen.
but it often forgets their truth. Here at Empress Secrets, we aim to restore it, to show that the women behind the portraits were not just symbols of wealth, but survivors of systems that demanded perfection and gave no mercy. If this story opened your eyes, shocked you, or made you rethink everything you believed about royal life, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Empress Secrets. because the world has spent centuries hiding the truth about powerful women. It's time we uncover their secrets, honor their strength, and learn from their pain. Comment below, what detail disturbed you the most? Was it the lice, the baths, the toilets, or the silent screams during childbirth? Let's talk. Let's remember. And let's promise never to silence the stories of women again. And always remember, you don't need a throne to be powerful. You don't need a crown to be royal. You just need the courage to rise, endure, and carry your truth with grace. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep uncovering the stories they tried to forget, only on Empress Secrets.